After such an explosion, the Russian tank literally evaporated. And now, watch as the Russian tank tries to escape after the unsuccessful attack. The Ukrainian drone catches up with it and hits the target. The result is satisfactory. The Russian tank stands no chance when faced with a Ukrainian drone armed with a shaped charge. Here's another example. In this footage, you can see how the attack by Russian paratroopers failed under the blows of Ukrainian artillery. Another APC with soldiers rushed to their aid, but the Ukrainian drone intercepted them. Here's another video from a different angle. The result exceeds all expectations. Take a close look at this scene. After a failed assault, Russian soldiers take cover under a tank to evade Ukrainian kamikaze drones. The Ukrainian drone armed with a shaped charge noticed them, but instead of targeting the soldiers, it aims for the tank's vulnerable spot, achieving a better result. Russian soldiers probably didn't expect that. In today's episode, you will see many dramatic scenes from the battlefield that were recently filmed. So, thumbs up for the great work of Ukrainian drone operators, and let's get started. Another abandoned T-90 tank after a Russian attack received 2 drone strikes and caught fire. The drone operators reluctantly have to burn down brand new Russian tanks so that they don't fall into Russian hands again. Take a look at this tank. It's absolutely new and undamaged, but at the moment, Ukrainian soldiers won't be able to claim it for themselves, so it must be destroyed. The Russians continue to attack the village of Berdichi and suffer heavy losses. This group of tanks came under Ukrainian artillery fire, but javelins are also being used here. Despite the fact that most Russian tanks are now being destroyed by kamikaze drones, and javelins have taken a back seat, they still remain a favorite weapon of Ukrainian infantrymen. Take a look at the next scene. A brand new Russian tank was sent to support the attacking group, but on the battlefield it encountered a Ukrainian drone. The operator used 2 FPV drones, hitting the tank in the same spot. The tank took the hit, but something seemed to catch fire inside. Over time, the fire only grew. Look at how well protected these new Russian tanks are. They are not easy to destroy. Therefore, our drone operator didn't wait long and dropped a grenade into the tank's open hatch. As you already know, this is the most vulnerable spot on all Russian tanks, as Russian soldiers always leave the tank hatch open. As a result, the tank was thoroughly cooked from the inside and outside. Going into battle, Russian soldiers understand that this may be their last fight. Look at this new Russian tank. It's on a mission, but a Ukrainian drone hits it in the engine compartment. As a result of the hit, the tank was forced to stop, and its crew flees in fear. They know that another drone will come soon. Note that this Russian tank is equipped with a new electronic warfare system, but it didn't help the Russians. A few minutes later, another Ukrainian drone arrived and skillfully dropped a grenade into the open hatch of the abandoned tank. The result is in favor of Ukraine. But now let's take a look at how the attack unfolded and how the Ukrainians repelled it. The Russians are making the same mistakes again. They are once again attacking with large columns of armored vehicles. This time, they aimed to capture a small village called Berdichi in eastern Ukraine. Several columns of tanks were moving towards the village from different directions. The Ukrainians are successfully using artillery, not allowing the Russians to even come close. However, due to a shortage of artillery ammunition, Ukrainians are resorting to FPV drones and anti-tank missiles. All of this combined yields results. Russian columns of armored vehicles are being destroyed, and the crews are fleeing the battlefield in fear. Abandoned Russian armored vehicles are subject to immediate destruction. This task is carried out by a specially trained team of drone operators. They possess exceptional skills in grenade throwing, even into the narrowest openings. Sometimes the Russians leave fairly new tanks on the battlefield without any damage. But the Ukrainian guys easily turn the Russian tank into a well-roasted steak. Additionally, they blow off its turret. Sometimes, when the Russians need to capture a position, they conduct assaults with small groups, a platoon of soldiers plus a tank or APC. Take a look at this example. A whole platoon of Russian soldiers is riding on one tank. Their tank was hit by a mine, and the soldiers fled without completing the commander's mission. Their fate is unknown, but the tank was disabled by a Ukrainian drone and eventually exploded. It's interesting that this tank was blown up by a mine that the Ukrainians remotely installed. In the next video, I'll show you how skillfully Ukrainians mine territories using special robots and create impassable barriers for the Russians. Here's another example of a tank that was blown up by a mine and then destroyed by a Ukrainian drone. All that's left in its place is a black crater. Over the recent period, we've seen numerous cases like these. Disabled tanks are being incinerated with the help of kamikaze drones. The main goal of drone operators is to prevent Russian infantry from reaching their destination. Therefore, drones preemptively strike Russian armored vehicles. Some of them fall into mine traps, like this one. As a result, the battlefield becomes littered with scattered Russian armored vehicles. They need to be either evacuated or completely destroyed. And now, take a look at how skillfully the drone operators work. The abandoned Russian armored vehicles burn and explode like matchboxes. This is my favorite shot. Please give a thumbs up for this. Abandoned on the battlefield, the Russian tank becomes a tempting prize for Ukrainian drone operators. It would be great to take this tank, but in the current circumstances, it's almost impossible. So it has to be destroyed instead. However, one can still enjoy the spectacle. We all know that Russian tanks are the best in the world when it comes to burning in flames. You'll be surprised, but Ukrainian soldiers compete among themselves for the best grenade throw into the hatch of Russian tanks. The hunt begins for those trying to escape the battlefield. This APC with Russians inside is an excellent target for a drone with a shaped charge. The fiery explosion instills terror in the remaining occupants. This tank was trying to retreat but immediately got his portion of retribution. This Russian T-90 tank hospitably welcomed the kamikaze drone into its cabin and burned down completely. But the Russians are also attacking from other directions. On this front section, the Ukrainians repel the attack solely with kamikaze drones. Look at how easily the Ukrainians deal with Russian tanks. Captured and abandoned Russian tanks are subject to immediate destruction. Typically, another team of drone operators handles this task. Thanks to them, we always have fresh footage of burning Russian tanks. Indeed, a single Russian tank can burn for a very long time, especially when its ammunition detonates and explodes. Sometimes this process can last for several hours. But the Russians continue to advance on other fronts as well. Here, they encounter fierce resistance from Ukrainian artillery. But for every shot, they receive incoming projectiles or get hit by FPV drone strikes. Sometimes Ukrainians use various types of anti-tank missiles. Overall, luck is not on their side. The Ukrainians repel another Russian attack, destroying all Russian tanks and APCs. No tank manages to survive during the attack. They all, without exception, will be destroyed. We've seen dozens of destroyed tanks just in the last week. By the way, this one was burned by an American M67 grenade. Thanks to the American people for the powerful weapon. After the failed attack, the battlefield is strewn with damaged tanks and APCs. But many tanks and armored vehicles still remain undamaged on the battlefield. Therefore, drone operators are persistently working to destroy all Russian weaponry. And of course, Russian trucks delivering ammunition to the front are also systematically destroyed. This video is evidence of the first case where Russians managed to hit the American HIMARS rocket artillery system. The HIMARS was spotted not far from the front line. To hit the American rocket artillery system, the Russians used a super powerful ballistic missile Iskander. After such a missile, the HIMARS is guaranteed to be destroyed. In 2 years of war, they have only destroyed 1 unit. But the Russians were very happy and consider it a great achievement. Their first capture was a Russian infantry fighting vehicle loaded with ammunition. Great job! Next, they repel the attack of Russian armored vehicles, not allowing them to break through. This Russian APC receives 2 drone strikes. Meanwhile, an artillery anti-infantry projectile explodes nearby. The Russians continue their attack but lose another APC, possibly detonated by a mine. When the Russians began to maneuver, the Ukrainians destroyed the lead tank with an anti-tank missile. Then, 2 kamikaze drones destroyed another armored vehicle. After that, the Russians stopped attacking as they suffered heavy losses. When the attack is halted, the Russians scatter in all directions.
Russian assaults near the village of Vodian, not far from Avdiivka. The video shows the result of one of the meat attacks. Take a look and try to count the number of broken and destroyed Russian pieces of equipment. They are pelting Ukrainian positions with meat and metal. I can't call it any other way. The Russians have installed the electronic warfare Pol-21 on these structures. The Ukrainians are using HIMARS to destroy this target. Why use such a powerful weapon? It's simple. These electronic warfare weapons are capable of interfering with drones and radio communications. This footage shows electronic warfare R-934 near Svitlodarsk, Donetsk region. The equipment was destroyed with the help of American HIMARS MLRS. Near Sivur, the Russians have tried to advance on this point. Let's see how well they did. We see that the first armored personnel carrier has been reduced to pieces of junk. That doesn't stop the armored group that followed it. The second armored vehicle explodes in the same place as the first. The third and fourth vehicles realize that only death awaits them. And now pay attention to this. A Ukrainian tank rides in front of the Russian APC and makes the first blow on the damaged armored personnel carrier. It loads the gun, and with the second shot, immobilizes the fleeing vehicle. Damn, these guys fight like the real elite. In parallel, the Ukrainians continue to destroy the Russian army using familiar weapons. Let's take a look at some of the work of HIMARS, artillery, and drones. A shark hits a Russian fuel tanker and several other Russian vehicles. The first artillery strike spooked the Russians, and one of the vehicles left the position. A little later, a passenger car arrived at the position to evacuate the unlucky ones. And this is the work of the National Guard of Ukraine. In this footage, you are watching the work of the Russian army's mortar crew. The reconnaissance drone is correcting the artillery strikes, and the Ukrainians' first shot hits the target and destroys it. Nice work. Nearby, the drone detects a UAV. A precise hit on the target. Fire and detonation. Shark UAV plus HIMARS MLRS is a deadly combination. Let's take a look at a practical example. First, the drone tracks down future victims. When it arrives at the parking lot, the coordinates are transmitted to the HIMARS, which in turn fires a missile at each target. As a result, the Pion, Grad, and Masta S are destroyed. The author of the video signed these strikes as HIMARS strikes on the electronic warfare R-934 Borysoglebsk 2 complex near Donetsk. I'm not sure that these are HIMARS. It kind of looks more like ordinary artillery, but it doesn't change the results. The complex completely destroyed. The Russians, having come under Ukrainian fire, requested evacuation, and an armored personnel carrier moved in. The Ukrainians saw this and launched several kamikaze drones. Now the Russians have no means of transportation and are stuck in a dangerous position. A Russian BMP-2. The reason why it was abandoned in the middle of the road is unknown. After the drone hits the armored personnel carrier, there is an explosion. Now, this trough is destroyed. Sharks tracked down an enemy location. 8 trucks, possibly for transporting personnel and ammunition. A second hit causes ammunition to ignite in one of the trucks. Vehicles nearby must have been damaged in the strikes as well. For dozens of soldiers, this day was their last. Excellent work by the reconnaissance and artillery. I don't know what the crew of this tank was doing, but they didn't do it for long. Suddenly, a Ukrainian drone knocked into the engine compartment and interrupted them. Another tank destroyed. This Buhanka was transporting weapons for Russian soldiers, but was stopped in time by a Ukrainian drone. This is a Russian Ural truck, and it has an automatic grenade launcher mounted on top. A kamikaze drone manages to hit a target that is already retreating. The second drone secures this result. Another armored personnel carrier arrives to evacuate the Russian soldiers. A third drone flies in to prevent it. Fortunately for the Russians, the drone does not reach them in time due to heavy interference. As I promised, I'm releasing part 2. Let's take a look at the madness that the Russians are engaging in. Klishchivka. At this point, the Russians have become more active and are trying to regain control of the settlement. A Russian armored strike group is moving across the fields towards the settlement. A Ukrainian drone is performing reconnaissance and adjusting artillery. Kaboom! The Russian guys are starting to have some serious problems on their hands. Ukrainian artillery begins to work the stalled column. 2 Russian armored personnel carriers are engulfed in flames. An immobilized tank stands nearby. The assault has failed. Near Soledar, Russian paratroopers went on a daring assault. A BMD moves towards the AFU positions and fires from a machine gun. A Stugna P ATGM missile hits the vehicle. The second missile kills the armored personnel carrier. The second armored personnel carrier with a paratrooper suffered no less. The Russians have resorted to a new tactic. They sent an armored group to assault during the night. The Ukrainians were scouting and did not miss the moment. A Russian tank explodes on mines. The fourth tank was damaged as a result of blowing up the previous tanks. As a result, the Russians lost 4 vehicles. The northern flank of Avdiivka. The Russian column leaves on a combat mission. The first armored personnel carrier goes to scout the road and runs into a mine barrier. The artillery hits the Russian vehicles very accurately. At some point, the Russians realize that it is madness to keep moving forward and begin to turn around. The second column advances to the assault. The Russian tank succeeds in destroying the Ukrainian mines. The second tank decides to repeat this insane challenge and turns into a pile of scrap metal. And what's this? Did HIMARS end up in the neighborhood? That doesn't stop the Russians. The third column continues to move on. Panic among the Russians. 2/3 of the armored vehicles destroyed. This leads to reckless action and more casualties. The Ukrainians sure are giving these Russians hell. 2 armored personnel carriers and 2 tanks move towards the Ukrainian positions. Ukrainians open fire and hit the armored personnel carrier. Probably they used an ATGM or a kamikaze drone. The tanks move off the road, changing the direction of their attack. The second armored personnel carrier is also immobilized. The tanks continue their attempt to flank the vehicle. They receive orders and begin to retreat, while firing on Ukrainian positions. The assault fails. The Kharkiv region. A suicidal attack of Russian tanks. The first tank, with a minesweeper, falls victim to an ATGM. It is stopped in its tracks, as well as the column that was moving behind it. The Ukrainians hit an armored personnel carrier with the second shot. A kamikaze drone flies towards the stopped column. It crashes into the tank, penetrates the armor, and leads to the explosion of the ammunition. The column is destroyed. The OSA anti-aircraft missile system is moving towards the forest to hide from the Ukrainians. As you might have guessed, the Russians didn't succeed. The Russian army's attack, meant to bring strategic success, did not go as planned. Russian tanks were blowing up, burning, and exploding again. Let's take a closer look. Tanks, APCs, and airborne troops, all ready for battle, split into small groups. The Ukrainians are using cluster bombs. An ATGM hits a Russian APC. A tank deploys troops in an open field. Now, this APC is nothing more than a meat grinder. The second group is just hundreds of meters from Ukrainian positions. They were met with a surprise left overnight. Pay attention to this synchronization. And these are the daredevils who went on solo attacks. Pure madness. The third group consists of APCs and the madmen inside of them. A precise ATGM hit stops the Russian armored vehicle, a tank, and 3 APCs. The Ukrainians are simply picking off tanks with javelins. Russian tanks are engulfed in flames. The attack goes on. APCs rush to take cover. It almost made it. But then, a Ukrainian kamikaze drone catches up with the APC. Now, check out this video. This column was just decimated. Ukrainians strike with cluster bombs to destroy the enemy's manpower. It's rather effective. This APC made an unforgivable mistake. From just 10 to 20 meters away, Ukrainians destroy it with an RPG shot. Such bravery deserves a like. And here's an ATGM Stugna P missile nearly hitting a Russian APC. The Russians try to dig in at one of the settlements in the Avdiivka region. A dozen soldiers disembark on the village's outskirts. An unpleasant surprise awaits them on the other side of the village. As the soldiers leave the APC, it drives away. Notice this moment. A kamikaze drone flies over the APC. The drone continues to tail the Russian armored vehicle. The operator waits for the right moment to deliver a crushing blow. The APC is immobilized. Another Ukrainian drone strikes. The APC is destroyed. One hit was enough to start a fire. The drone returns and discovers the debris that used to be this tub. Another hero, a tank nicknamed Kuzbas. The Russians tried to protect it from all sides. And maybe it could have withstood 1 or 2 more hits from a kamikaze drone, but it couldn't save it from a grenade. The fire did its job. Kuzbas burned to ashes. In this video, Ukrainian strike drones destroy what attacked the Ukrainians during the day. First, they burned a tank. And then a group of 3 units, a tank and 2 APCs. A perfect bonfire. Another tank. Some of the ammunition detonated, but it wasn't enough to tear the tank apart. This is what it all looks like the next day. This is the same place we saw in the previous video, where the drone was finishing off the Russian tanks. Yep, sometimes all that remains of a tank is a metal husk like this. Or as these 2 APCs changed color due to the high temperature of the fire. Everything inside incinerated. And here are the tanks from the beginning of the video. A similar situation befell this Russian tank. One drone was enough to set it on fire. And here are some more beautiful shots of burning Russian junk. And this T-80 was instantly reduced to molecules after encountering a drone. What idiot allowed this foolishness? Let me explain what happened here. The APC brought TM-62 anti-tank mines and unloaded them nearby. The fatal mistake was the delay. They should have retreated immediately. From the explosion, the APC did a sideways somersault. Here's another moment. Ukrainians were sure that Russian infantry was hiding here and made a precise strike on this building. And here, the Russians knew what was waiting for them, so they tried to hide. But they underestimated the skill of the FPV operator, who aimed the drone right at them. Take another look at how spectacular that was. After the occupants broke through the first line of defense, the AFU fielded an experienced 47 Mechanized Brigade, which was equipped with Western weapons and was able to stop the enemy. The situation in Avdiivka was not bad for Ukraine. They controlled the flanks, height, and presence of troops in the territory of Coke, and the chemical plant made life 10 times more difficult for the enemy. The reason why it was abandoned in the middle of the road is unknown. After the drone hits the armored personnel carrier, there is an explosion. Now, this trough is destroyed. One more episode. One of the Russian armored personnel carriers is already engulfed in flames. The second one pulls off the road and stops? For what? The third vehicle starts moving, and at that moment, the Ukrainians hit the target exactly. Excellent work by the artillery. Novodonetsk, the Donetsk region. A Russian column moves towards Ukrainian positions. One of the tanks explodes. What do you think destroyed it? You'd be surprised. A Ukrainian tank drove alone against the column and hit the Russian enemy with an apt shot. The Ukrainians don't stop and continue to deliver blow after blow. At some point, the tank casts a thermal curtain and starts backing up. Apparently, the Russians tried to aim an ATGM at it. The Russians lose another tank. Hopefully, we'll see more of this story later. Another unsuccessful assault by the Russian army. Even after the BMP is hit, the tank continues to move forward. This is his last mistake. The assault has failed. The armored personnel carrier and the tank are destroyed. And this is already a jeweled hit from Ukrainian artillery. This Russian tank paid dearly for stopping. A precise hit from 155mm ammunition turns the tank into a piece of metal. Let's start with 2 episodes of failed assaults. 3 Russian tanks decided to attack the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces. The first and the second tank are hit by the Ukrainians using ATGMs, and this Russian tank can't escape death. But let's return to armored personnel carriers and Russian tanks. More footage of the magical transformation of a Russian tank into a pile of scrap metal. The Avdiivka region. A Russian T-90M tank assaults Ukrainian positions. Ukrainians deploy artillery to hinder this. As things heat up, the tank starts to retreat. At that moment, it's caught by a kamikaze drone. The modern Russian tank is destroyed. And here's a cargo truck and an armored car, Tiger. They both become easy prey for kamikaze drones. A Russian cargo truck brought ammunition to the positions, and the Ukrainians immediately destroyed it. What a pity. Now it's the turn of this Soviet junk, a T-62 tank from 1967. This is the kind of scrap the Russians are pulling to the front. Now it's the APC's turn. One grenade and $400,000 turns into scrap metal. A drone drops explosives into an APC. A fire starts immediately. A powerful explosion and detonation of ammunition occur. Am I the only one who likes watching such footage? That combination of fire and armored vehicles. There's something mesmerizing about it. It's target number 2's turn. The APC instantly ignites, and a powerful explosion follows immediately. I want to watch it again. Excellent. A crater is left in its place. Target 3. The flame gradually intensifies. Ammunition starts to detonate. It's beautiful. Here are 2 Russian tanks from one of the failed attacks I showed at the beginning. The Ukrainians target a T-90 tank. This video shows the perfect performance of a 155mm smart projectile. Pay attention to the accuracy. You can clearly see the trajectory of the projectile in these shots. For example, this is the defeat of a Russian tank by a Javelin missile. There was no detonation. Apparently, it was without ammunition. Abandoned Russian equipment must be destroyed. Kamikaze drones are excellent at this task. Look how this drone neatly flies inside the AFV. Nice work. Naturally, it was not without epic explosions. This is how beautifully the Russian AFV turned into scrap metal. Also, this Russian tank. Nice bang. Another tank of militants. A Ukrainian soldier videotapes the detonation of the tank. Near Sivur. The Russians have tried to advance on this point. Let's see how well they did. We see that the first armored personnel carrier has been reduced to pieces of junk. That doesn't stop the armored group that followed it. The second armored vehicle explodes in the same place as the first. The Russians begin the attack. The tank goes first, followed by the BMP. The armored personnel carrier continuously fires at them. At some point, the armored personnel carrier turns into a cloud of fire and shrapnel. What weapon do you think is capable of this? At first, I thought it was a Javelin or anti-tank mines, but no, it was a Ukrainian kamikaze drone. Wow, what a powerful explosion! And here's what happened to the Russian tank that was leading. First, the Ukrainians immobilized it, then directed a kamikaze drone at it and burned it. It's no secret that Ukrainians have managed to secure positions on the left bank of Kherson. It was these positions that Russian tanks aimed to storm. The Ukrainians don't have heavy machinery here, but they do have kamikaze drones. A drone strikes the tank's turret, and not even an armored shield can handle that. The shaped charge reaches the ammunition, causing a massive detonation. Let's return to the destruction of equipment. I've got more to show. The drone dives into its target. The APC is instantly engulfed in flames. In 30 minutes, the Russian APC was completely burned out. That's simply the amount of time it took the Ukrainians to replace the battery and return. This is a Russian tank. And this is the same tank through the eyes of a kamikaze drone. A perfect hit. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone inspected the Russian tracked crematorium. Or take a look at this video. 5 kamikaze drones attack a Russian tank. The 5th hit becomes fatal for the Russian armor. A crater is formed in the tank's location. Can you imagine the power of that explosion? I think that after such a strike, this tank is not combat ready. As in this case. And here's another T-90, which couldn't cross a puddle and got stuck in the mud. And this is all on one section of the front. Can you imagine how many resources Russia is burning in this war? The enemy is very strong. Yes, these are tracked crematoriums, and the Russian soldiers taking part in this? Lunatics. Here's the perfect example. The incendiary mixture falls on the netting protecting the tank from grenades and bombs. The contents gradually drip onto the tank, and the flames spread to the hull. Let's move now to another section of the front where constant fighting is taking place. These two APCs were stopped by mines. After one of them explodes, another explosion occurs. Pay attention to this exact moment here. An armor plate falls on a mine, hits it, and another explosion happens. This APC was carrying ammunition to Russian soldiers at their positions. Another pair of APCs. The drone first approaches from the left side, but the hit doesn't yield the desired result. Then, the Ukrainians send a second drone. This hit becomes fatal. Both APCs are destroyed. The Ukrainians thwarted the Russians' attempt to evacuate their damaged tank. The strike drone returns with explosives to prevent such attempts in the future. The mission was completed successfully. Another Russian tank. The drone again hits the target precisely. This piece of Russian junk is also destroyed. The Russians are moving the 2S-19 Masta-S self-propelled howitzer into the forest to hide it from Ukrainian reconnaissance drones. The Ukrainians, however, see all of this. When the howitzer is securely hidden, the Ukrainians launch a HIMARS missile at it. The target is eliminated. These are the frames of the work of a Russian UAV team. A Ukrainian drone tracked a Russian reconnaissance drone and followed it to the command post. Then, the HIMARS took over. And how about this beauty? A kamikaze drone strikes an abandoned Russian armored personnel carrier. The damage causes a fire, and then an explosion. Beautiful footage of burning Russian junk. Here's another piece of Russian junk. The drone flies right inside. The fire does its job. When the drone returned, it found this. And who do we have here? This drone perfectly flies into the armored personnel carrier, and then it's the same old story. And here's another Russian tank. The operator perfectly executes the task and destroys the tank. There's another target nearby, also a tank. Watch how beautifully it explodes after the drone's hit. Another example. 2 Russian tanks were stopped by Ukrainian warriors. Ukrainians use kamikaze drones to finish them off completely. This Russian APC decided to pave its own way. Relying on luck, the APC rushes towards the trench, but explodes on mines. This venture cost the Russians another APC. In the tree line, a Russian tank stops. A fatal mistake. After the first hit, it accelerates and charges towards the Ukrainians. The second hit immobilizes it. It immediately catches fire. Take a look at these flames. The Russian tank is destroyed. The negligence of this APC became fatal. Venturing into direct fire from the Ukrainian tank, there was no escape for it. One shot, and the target is hit. Impact and explosion. This is how it looks from the tank's perspective. Such precise work deserves a thumbs up. The Russian column of tanks and APCs was spotted by the Ukrainians. They split into groups and attack from several directions at once. The first to come under fire is an APC. Next, the Ukrainians destroy a tank. This APC runs over mines. It turned into a crematorium on tracks. And this is a hit from a Javelin missile. The affected tank moves about 10 meters and stops. The Russians try to flee, but run into mines. Out of the entire column, only this armored personnel carrier manages to survive. It crosses the road and gets stuck. Today, we're going to dive into this madness and try to answer the question, what's wrong with the Russian army? It all starts with the insane attacks of Russian armored groups. The crew of this tank doesn't realize it's walked into a trap. Not only are Ukrainian soldiers to the left of the tank, but there are also surprises laid out on the road ahead. By the way, a Ukrainian soldier missed the tank with an anti-tank guided missile, but the mines saved the day. The second tank, not wanting to meet the same fate as its comrades, starts to reverse. The chances of escaping the battlefield seem slim, but they try anyway. The second Russian tank also explodes on the mines. The attack is a failure. Looks like another armored group. The first tank, equipped with a mine plow, leads the way, and for good reason. It hits the mines and stops. In these frames, Ukrainians finish off a previously halted Russian tank. A powerful explosion. No chance. Take, for example, this Russian tank. Its attempt to hide from the battlefield failed. Here's another good example. The tank was leaving, but the drone struck it and detonated the ammunition. For our channel sponsors, an uncensored video with unique footage has just been released. You can find the link in the description of this video and in the hint. This kamikaze drone circles around an MTLB abandoned by the Russians. The operator chooses the most favorable angle for the attack. He manages to land the drone right in the open hatch and destroys the Russian junk. In this place, a Russian tank hit mines and was immobilized, and then it awaited a quite obvious fate. Another Russian tank, and the same exact fate. Another one? Maybe it's time for us to create a ranking of the most beautiful destruction of Russian tanks by Ukrainian kamikaze drones. The legendary Bukhanka and its adventures in Ukraine. Another one. It's so symbolic that it's standing near an Orthodox cross. And that's all. Powerful. These Russians thought that the night would help them hide from Ukrainian drones. Ukrainians modify kamikaze drones, installing night vision cameras in them. Take a look at how clearly the Russian APC is visible at night. The second hit. Excellent work. This Russian tank, after enduring 4 bombs to the engine compartment, is headed for the scrapyard. This Russian tank drives over mines and becomes an easy target for the Javelin anti-tank missile. A precise hit. The missile penetrates inside and ignites the propellants. The tank, utterly destroyed. This tank joined the Russian army in 2022, but today, Ukrainians put an end to its tour on their lands. But these are not the only targets that Ukrainians have hit. 2 kamikaze drones destroyed this Strela 10 air defense system. And this is how HIMARS rockets struck the Grad MLRS. The second target was camouflaged, but that didn't hinder its detection and destruction. For the third target, Ukrainians waited for the right moment and then delivered a devastating blow with a kamikaze drone. The operator of this drone is a real ace. The hatch of the Russian tank was open less than half. Take another look at this throw. The tank catches fire. Take a look at this video. Is this not sheer madness? Russian tanks, armored personnel carriers, and soldiers are seemingly on a suicide mission against the Ukrainian defense. But that's not all. The Ukrainians have spotted another target, another BMP. A kamikaze drone qualitatively fulfills the task. To make sure of it, a second drone arrives, also armed with explosives. There's no need for it, and so it flies away. A Russian tank was abandoned after a failed assault. The operator is trying to get the drone into the open hatch. It succeeds on the second attempt. Now we can watch a beautiful fire show. In these frames, Ukrainian kamikaze drones are killing what is left of the Russian column after meeting with the Ukrainians. Who wants a deep-fried buhanka? A drone blast rips the car apart from the inside out. The Akatsia SPA covers the Russians attacking near Avdiivka. A Ukrainian drone successfully eliminates this target. The SBU has discovered a warehouse with anti-tank mines. At any moment, the Russians may use them to strengthen their defenses. So we must not delay. The warehouse is destroyed. Another truck with a mortar. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone goes after its target. Nice hit. A Russian T-80 tank. After another meaty assault, the Russians abandoned it. Now, the Ukrainians will take care of it. It burns well. During a daytime reconnaissance mission, a vehicle was detected moving towards the forward positions. Having followed the movement of the car, the Ukrainians discovered the deployment of Russian soldiers. The decision was made to destroy the vehicle and make the occupants nervous. As it later turned out, the vehicle was carrying ammunition. After the failed attack, the Russians drop their cans and flee. The drone hovers over the AFV and makes the first drop. A grenade falls nearby. The operator corrects the drone. The second grenade hits the target. This, however, is not enough. The armored vehicle must be destroyed. The fourth grenade hits exactly in the engine compartment. Now, it can be considered that the task is accomplished. In the morning, the drone returns to evaluate its nightly work. You can see the results on your screens. Russian-style demining. It turned out to be quite effective. A Russian tank hits the first, second, third mine, and imagine that it's still able to continue moving. Although the explosions look quite impressive. The tank passes through a wooded area, enters a field, and begins to clear anti-personnel mines. Once again, it hits an anti-tank mine. This was enough for the tank to catch fire, and the crew decided to abandon it. A good example for other Russian tankers to destroy armored vehicles. 2 APCs packed with paratroopers race across the open terrain. They are detected and try to break through with a fight. Kamikaze drones are directed at them. This is what the operator of a Ukrainian FPV drone sees. Drone drops explosives into an APC. A fire starts immediately. A powerful explosion and detonation of ammunition occur. Am I the only one who likes watching such footage? That combination of fire and armored vehicles. There's something mesmerizing about it. It's target number 2's turn. The APC instantly ignites, and a powerful explosion follows immediately. I want to watch it again. Excellent. A crater is left in its place. Another T-90. It's easy to recognize by its unique turret. It is also destroyed. On the battlefield, many damaged but not destroyed tanks remain. While the Russians have retreated, it's necessary to destroy what they left behind in their fight. Thus, the Ukrainians will now be burning tank after tank, APC after APC, leaving nothing for the Russians. Yet ahead is still half a video with a large amount of destroyed Russian armor. I wonder what these Russians were discussing. The Ukrainians release a birdie with explosives. It hits the armored personnel carrier. The explosion easily tears it apart and scatters pieces of armor. A powerful blast. From this video, it becomes clear just how destructive FPV drones can be. After the second hit, a part of the building simply crumbled. And this happened even though the drone exploded inside, not upon impact with a wall. Now, the Bradley has lived up to its nickname, Tank Killer. In these next frames, a modern Russian T-90M tank turns into a sieve. The American combat monster once again confirmed its effectiveness. The M242 Bushmaster cannon is capable of penetrating up to 40 millimeters of steel armor. The fatal mistake of this Russian tank is its position relative to the Bradley. Incendiary and armor-piercing rounds damaged the tank's systems. The crew panicked, released smoke screens, and tried to retreat. But the machine already had its critical damage. This is what a Russian tank looks like after an encounter with Brad. Bradley came to stop the Russian infantry, which is crossing the field to storm Ukrainian positions. Even if the Russians reach another planting, it changes nothing. The cannon cuts down trees like thin branches. They offer no cover. This is an incident near Avdiivka. Ukrainian assault troops called for reinforcements. The Bradley IFV easily suppresses the Russian advance. And even if the Russians manage to occupy a building, there's no sense in hiding in it. Brad's cannon will riddle the building's walls. Another thwarted attack of Russian tanks. The kamikaze drone pursues the target and hits the tank in the most vulnerable part of the turret. This part of the Russian tank stores some of the ammunition. That's why they often explode after being hit by drones. The turret was thrown several meters from the tank. Excellent work. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone enters the Russian tank with precision. After a few seconds of agonizing wait, an explosion occurs. It seems the Ukrainians have started using self-destructing systems for drones in such cases. Smoke, fire, and a spectacular explosion. This video is yet another good example. The Russians should have long considered the storage of ammunition in the tank turret. Look at the force with which the turret is thrown up. At that moment, incredible pressure is created inside the tank. After the failed assault, the Russians abandoned their tank. Ukrainians use FPV drones to destroy it. One of the hits proves fatal for the Russian tank. Kamikaze drones can reach Russian tanks, armored personnel carriers, and infantry in the most inaccessible places or several kilometers from the front line. In this video, the Russians are preparing fortification structures, and engineering equipment is at work. The drone dives into an excavator, and an explosion occurs. The fuel ignites brilliantly. The job is done perfectly. Or this operation to destroy a BM-21 Grad in the rear. Special forces identify the target, launched a drone, and directed it to the Russian rocket artillery. The Russians tried to change their location, but they couldn't escape pursuit. The existence of this BM-21 Grad is terminated. Another group of soldiers rushes to assist. Are the Russians running out of tanks? This attack used only APCs. The first target is hit. While these Russians were thinking about what to do next, another drone came in. And here's the strike on the third APC. 3 drones at once. Another APC. Beautiful. And the final target. This one got the farthest, but it didn't save it from destruction. Excellent work. Facing such fierce resistance, the Russians decide to hide their APC in a garage. 3 kamikaze drones attack the target. The APC was burned. If you look closely, you can see its turret. The northern region. APCs fall into a trap. A Ukrainian kamikaze drone first blows up one. The second target. This APC thought it would find protection in a strip of forest. The APC is burned. And this is a strike on Russian logistical support, a truck carrying supplies. The Ukrainians sent a second drone. After meeting the truck, it flared up. Fire destroyed the entire vehicle. The Russians stopped to fix their truck. Ukrainians took advantage of the pause and delivered a devastating strike. Ukrainian drones come to spook the enemy. The first target is TM-62 anti-tank mines. What a powerful explosion! And here's the fourth Grad. The fifth target. Another strike by HIMARS. The Grad is destroyed. And that's not all. Another MLRS. And take a look at the fire after being hit. Another excellent fireworks display. This series concludes with this strike. Some very effective work. How about this visit by a kamikaze drone to an enemy bunker? I don't know what was stored there, but it burned and detonated for a long time. A beautiful spectacle. The Russian radar Yastreb with an astonishing cost of $250 million. Ukrainians didn't hesitate to use HIMARS missiles to destroy such a rare and important target.